The markets in Shanghai are bustling. In Moscow, energy deals are quietly signed in rubles. Across South America, leaders gather to discuss trade agreements in local currencies. Something profound is happening. Countries around the world are moving away from the US dollar. This isn't just a passing trend. It's a seismic shift in the global financial system. For decades, the dollar has been the backbone of international trade, a symbol of stability and power. But now, nations are questioning its dominance. Why? What's driving this historic shift? And most importantly, what does it mean for the future of global finance and America's role in the world? To understand why the world is increasingly abandoning the US dollar, we have to examine the history of its dominance. For decades, the dollar wasn't just another currency, it was the currency. It became the world's reserve currency after World War II, when the Bretton Woods Agreement tied it to gold and made it the standard for global trade. Even after the US abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the dollar retained its supremacy. Oil, one of the most traded commodities on the planet, was priced exclusively in dollars, giving the US a unique position of power. But that dominance didn't just happen, it was earned through trust, stability, and the sheer size of the American economy. Today, however, that trust is beginning to waver, and nations are asking a dangerous question: do we need the dollar at all? At the heart of this shift is the weaponization of the dollar. Over the years, the United States has used its financial system as a tool of foreign policy, imposing economic sanctions on countries like Iran, Venezuela, and most recently, Russia. These sanctions have been devastating for the targeted nations, cutting them off from the global financial system and preventing them from accessing the SWIFT network for international payments. But these measures have also had unintended consequences. Instead of crippling these nations into submission, they've pushed them to find ways to bypass the dollar altogether. Russia offers a compelling example. After facing unprecedented sanctions following its invasion of Ukraine, Russia shifted much of its trade to currencies like the Chinese yuan and even the Indian rupee. Moscow began pricing its oil and gas exports in these currencies instead of the dollar, a move that would have seemed unthinkable just a decade ago. China, Russia's largest trading partner, has eagerly embraced this shift, as it aligns perfectly with Beijing's broader ambition to internationalize the yuan. China's role in this story cannot be overstated. As the world's second-largest economy and America's chief rival, China has long sought to challenge the dollar's dominance. Over the past decade, Beijing has taken significant steps to elevate its currency, the yuan, on the global stage. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, China has encouraged countries to trade with it in yuan. Additionally, China has established currency swap agreements with dozens of nations, allowing them to bypass the dollar entirely in bilateral trade. Perhaps the most revolutionary step has been the creation of the digital yuan, a state-backed digital currency that doesn't require the traditional banking system for transactions. The digital yuan represents a direct challenge to the dollar's dominance, especially for nations looking to avoid US sanctions or reduce transaction costs. By offering an alternative to the SWIFT system, the digital yuan is reshaping how countries think about international trade. But this isn't just about China and Russia. Across the globe, countries are exploring ways to reduce their dependence on the dollar. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have been vocal about their desire to create a new reserve currency to rival the dollar. In Southeast Asia, the ASEAN bloc is discussing mechanisms to settle trade in local currencies, bypassing the dollar altogether. In South America, Brazil and Argentina recently announced plans to develop a common currency for trade between their nations. Even the oil-rich nations of the Middle East, long considered staunch allies of the United States, are beginning to diversify. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, has hinted at accepting currencies other than the dollar for its oil exports. This would be a monumental shift, signaling the end of an era where oil was exclusively traded in dollars. What's driving this global move away from the dollar? The reasons are as varied as the nations involved. For some, it's about reducing reliance on the US and avoiding the consequences of sanctions. For others, it's about gaining economic independence and avoiding the volatility of a dollar-centric financial system. And for emerging economies, it's about asserting their place in a multipolar world where no single country holds all the power. Technological advancements are also playing a role. Digital currencies, particularly those backed by central banks, are providing alternatives to the traditional dollar-based financial system. China's digital yuan is leading the charge, but other nations are developing their own digital currencies, which could further erode the dollar's dominance. But what does this all mean for the United States? The implications are enormous. If the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency, the U.S. could face higher borrowing costs, reduced influence in global trade, and diminished power to impose sanctions. The exorbitant privilege of printing the world's reserve currency has allowed the U.S. to run massive trade deficits and borrow cheaply. Losing that privilege would force America to confront economic realities it has long been able to avoid. For the global economy, the consequences are equally significant. A multipolar currency system could lead to increased volatility as nations navigate new exchange rate dynamics. But it could also lead to greater financial stability for nations that have long been at the mercy of dollar fluctuations. The world isn't abandoning the dollar overnight. The greenback remains deeply entrenched in global finance, and transitioning away from it is a complex process. But the signs are clear. The era of unquestioned dollar dominance is coming to an end. Countries are no longer willing to accept a system that revolves around a single currency, and they're building alternatives to ensure they don't have to. This is a turning point in the history of global finance. The dollar's supremacy, once seen as inevitable and unshakable, is now being challenged on multiple fronts. Whether this leads to a new era of multipolar cooperation or financial instability remains to be seen. One thing is certain: the world of tomorrow will not look like the world of today. The question is, are we ready for it?